Life and Adventures of Jack Engle, an Autobiography, in which the reader will find some familiar characters, by Walt Whitman. Read by Frank Blissett. Chapter 13. Tom Peterson was about the cleverest, finest, manliest fellow I ever knew, and I think as true a friend at heart as young men often meet with. Tom had all the best qualities of the hero of my childish admiration, mentioned aforetime as Bill Jiggs, added to which he possessed the cultivation which results from going to school, mixing a good deal with fellows, seeing life as it is to be seen in a great city like New York, and, most of all, from a warm, generous heart and a disposition to the enjoyment of life. His temper was happy and cheerful. His laugh, when he opened his mouth and showed those great white teeth, was real music that you couldn't get from fiddles or pianos, and when he laughed heartily, it was impossible not to think of the sunshine or something of that sort. Tom was a handsome dog withal, and used to take the feather out of my cap a little too often for my equanimity, in our acquaintance among the girls. But then he was always so good-natured about it, and not a bit vain or greedy, that one couldn't remain angry long. All my boyish confidences and troubles and revenges and speculations were known to Tom Peterson. I wonder that I haven't introduced him in this writing before. He saved my life once, when I was learning to swim. I had jumped overboard like a fool, on the assurance of some Johnny Raw that once in deep water I would be certain to swim to the shore when I found there was no other way of reaching it. Without Tom's efficient services then, there would never have appeared this entertaining history. We never had a fight or a quarrel together, which is a pretty strange thing for boys. It was more to my friend's credit than mine, too. When I showed anything like irritation or bad temper, he would take refuge in silence and in his own amiability. And he was amiable, without being the least bit of a coward. His tendency to peace and goodwill was part of a nature that could be brave as a lion when the occasion demanded. The Lord love you, Tom Peterson, wherever you are this day. As far as I remember, you hated nothing which he has made. What a blockhead old Peterson was to whine and mourn out his complaints over the sinful nature of this son! If a man couldn't be proud of such a son as Tom Peterson, he must be hard to please. Tom sinful? Why, he hadn't a drop of bad blood in his great, broad-shouldered body. But so thought not Calvin, the father. Especially was he horrified at Tom's intimacy with a lady, whose name he didn't know, but whose nature he felt sure, so the really grieved and unhappy old man told me, was next worst to the Prince of Darkness himself. For the alarmed father sought me out, knowing my friendship with Tom, and supposing I had influence over him. He sought me out and told me that the young man was sometimes absent from home all night, and, as near as could be found out, he spent his time in a splendid and seductive gambling-house, kept by an old Jewess and her daughter, in great style, uptown. I really felt sorry for Peterson. although I could not promise to interfere any further than to give Tom a chance to explain the matter if he thought fit. At the same time, I comforted the grieved man by reminding him how unlikely the story seemed. Tom was no saint, we all knew, but he had been equally free from anything like dissipation or coarse tastes. "Have you spoken to him about these things?" I asked Calvin. "No, not a word. I had not the heart to." It seemed to me that this was a great pity, but I knew from what Tom himself had told me that the father and son took such different views of things, and I forbore to advise any further. That very evening I made it my business to see Tom, and we took a walk together out into the park that lay at no great distance. I opened the subject with some misgivings, and told the young man of his father's sorrow. He answered me with his natural frankness, and, as I suspected, the rumor which had come to the ears of the elder Peterson proved to be much ado about nothing. At the same time, the young man almost cried when I told him of his father's genuine distress. "Come with me for half an hour," said Tom, "and then I will tell you all about it." We walked up one of the avenues for nearly a mile, and then turning round a corner, Tom stopped at a plain but elegant house, rang the bell, and was admitted. "Tom Peterson and a friend," said he to the inquiring look of the servant, who, after drawing chairs for us in an open space at the side of the hall, seemed to be waiting for something. The servant vanished instanter, and in a minute or two made his appearance again, and said, "The ladies wish you to step upstairs." We walked up and were shown into a richly furnished parlor, well carpeted, and with sofas, lounges, and gas lights. The walls ornamented with pictures, and the corners with 2 or 3 voluptuous pieces of statuary. One upon a sofa, and one upon a lounge, who should bless my sight than Mrs. Cellini and her showy-looking black-eyed daughter Rebecca? "We will sit down a moment," answered Tom to their polite invitation, "but only for a moment, as we cannot stay." "That's a pity," said Rebecca, with an unmistakably loving glance at Tom, "for we are to have nobody here tonight, at least nobody we care for, if you go away." "No doubt we are precious treasures," said Tom laughingly, "but we can't stay more than 15 minutes by the watch." Mrs. Cellini spoke of Covert, whom she praised, though I thought it was with a dash of sarcasm. Rebecca bluntly expressed her opinion, interrupting her mother to that effect, that he was one of the greatest scoundrels in Wall Street or its neighborhood, apparently considering that she had put the case about as strongly as the English language allowed. "Don't abuse him," joined in Tom, "for my friend here will fight in behalf of his very shoestrings." I disclaimed any intention of committing myself so deeply, and Tom added, "Rebecca behaves like a true woman. She set her cap for the old man, and he is too cunning for her." We all laughed at this sally, the young Jewess as much as the rest. "You are mistaken there again," said she. "You put the saddle on the wrong horse. Tell the truth now. Don't you go down to Wall Street at least once a week and try to captivate that innocent old man? And have you not lured him even into this house? Heaven only knows what you have done to him here." Rebecca laughed heartily. "What would you say," cried she, "if you knew that not 1 hour ago this worthy gentleman was in the very room where we are now? Aha! Didn't I say so? In this very room, making love to me, making love, I tell you. And you accepted him? Come, Tom, you are too bad. Well, tell me your answer to covert, if this be true, and I have done." Rebecca smiled mischievously. "To confess the truth," said she, "I did not answer at all by word of mouth. I gave him a look, kicked over a footstool, and sailed out of the room with a magnificent bang of the door behind me. So." And she rose, struck an attitude, frowned, gave Tom a good kick on the shins, and marched off with a comico-serious air, as of a tragedy queen, giving the same effect with the door wherewith she had celebrated her departure from the lawyer. When Tom and I left this place and walked homeward, for that was the last we saw of the young Jewess that night, he told me all about it. My friend hadn't lived 21 years in the city and grown up with the use of a pair of active legs and 2 tolerably sharp eyes to be a perfect Joseph, nor to remain in the snowy preservation of pastoral simplicity. Favorite as he was with all who knew him, he had seen nearly every phase of town life, and had been, though not as a habituant, in all sorts of places. Mrs. Cellini's was truly nothing more or less than a fashionable gambling house. Tom told me that if I had stayed till midnight, I could have found, on going downstairs, a magnificent suite of rooms, superbly furnished and lit up, and accommodated with the means for every sort of genteel gaming. Here visited many people, of many sorts, but over all, as if by silent consent, was thrown the thin veil of Mrs., or, as she was more often called, Madame Cellini's, respectability and decorous housekeeping. There was nothing worse than gaming, and even that not so deeply and unfairly as in many places of the sort. Madame was fond of passing herself as the widow of an emigrant member of the French nobility, but she was neither more nor less than an old Jew tradeswoman. Rebecca was by no means the least attraction to the house, although, beyond presiding at the suppers, which she invariably did, she had very little to say to the visitors. It was upon one of Tom's casual visits here with a friend that the young Jewess was interested in his welfare. She found means to inform him of her feelings, and after such a communication it was not exactly the nature of young Mr. Peterson to pack up his valise and leave in the first boat. Of anything in the nature of gambling, Tom was perfectly innocent. One reason was, he had no money, and another was that he hadn't learnt without advantage the lessons of the practical student whose books are the things and men here in this great metropolis. Tom had cut his eye-teeth, although he couldn't join with his father Calvin in devotional performances. The many nights that Mr. Peterson complained about Tom's spending away dwindled down to 2, and Tom assured me that he had not neglected his business, nor drank a glass of liquor the past 3 months. And, moreover, there was not a straw beyond what he now told me. As to Rebecca, he wound up, while I cannot feel indifferent to her, still you need not think I am in love, at least not yet. The woman I love must be... But never mind what. The night is late, and the best move we can make is for each to get himself to his virtuous bed. To be continued. That was Chapter 13 of Life and Adventures of Jack Engle, an autobiography, in which the reader will find some familiar characters, by Walt Whitman. Read by Frank Blissett.